Buffalo Bills at the Baltimore Ravens Sunday night. Wow, it's a nice little Sunday night football game. I'm not going to wait all day for this game, as the song implies.
No?
Got other work to do. But this is a good one to wait for.
You will be waiting, though. I mean, you'll be doing other things as well. There are other games happening. But you're still
I'll be locked in. I'll be
still
locked
waiting
in
for Sunday night.
12 other NFL football games that day. But Ravens are favored by 2.5 here. Your undefeated Bills, number one atop so many power rankings because of how they've just done this, and they just did it in prime time, undressing the Jags on Monday Night Football. And the Ravens are still favored by 2.5 here. Vegas is not fooled.
Yeah, that is kind of fascinating. I mean, Buffalo has looked as good as any team in the NFL, really, through the first few weeks. And the Ravens haven't at all. And yet they're still favored, albeit at home. But that's about the home field advantage. So Vegas, the man in Vegas, thinks this is a coin flip, effectively. Which does feel quite generous to Baltimore based off what we've seen from both teams so far.
Did we look back at, really quick, Baltimore's starting schedule, starting with the Chiefs, then they have the Raiders, who they lost to, then they have the Cowboys, supposed to be one of the best teams in the league, then they have the Bills. That is a rough start, at least on paper, for the Ravens.
It is, and, they a toe away from tying it up against Kansas City with a one-play, do-or-die, win it or not. So it's not like they've been annihilated by these teams, but still, they haven't looked like, a really, really good team yet, whereas Buffalo absolutely has. Where Baltimore have been very strong, though, is they probably have the best run defense in the NFL right now. And this is where, this is more important than it's been in previous years. I wonder if they can really clamp down on Buffalo's offense and force them to be more aggressive and try and make them a little bit more one-dimensional. Basically do everything that Jacksonville couldn't or wasn't prepared to do. Take away the run game, really crowd the underneath with bodies, force them to try and win over the top, try and generate either explosive plays or Josh Allen craziness, or whether Buffalo can actually find the spaces and still continue to dink and dunk in all that crowd underneath.
One interesting thing about this matchup is in the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson era, we haven't seen this matchup all that often. And we certainly haven't seen it often since Josh Allen became a star, right? Let's use 2020 as the cutoff for Josh Allen becoming a star. That season, the Bills beat the Ravens in the divisional playoff game in 2020, 17-3. Do I have that right? Yeah. And then the Bills the Bills won in Baltimore early in 2022. Like, they haven't played a lot, right? We've seen a whole lot of Burrow versus Mahomes. We've seen a lot of Mahomes versus Lamar. We haven't seen a lot of Allen versus Lamar when they've both been on the field and they've both been great. So it's a rarity. And they haven't, again, Buffalo's like one play away from going to the AFC Championship last year against Baltimore. We just haven't seen this matchup a whole lot. So in other matchups, we've seen, hey, the Bengals, when they're at their best, match up pretty well against the Bills, or they match up well against the Chiefs, or the Ravens are trying to get over the hump against the Chiefs. We don't have a whole lot of history in this one, which is just another, I don't know. It just makes it a little bit more intriguing for me.
Well, against between two superstar quarterbacks. Like, this sort of world of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes seem to play all the time. Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow seem to play all the time. But Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, who would be sort of two of the four top quarterbacks in any given year, don't play that often.
One of the stats that stood out to me was the Bills. The Bills' defense, man. Again, they've dealt with so many injuries. They're allowing just 26% completions on 10-plus yard throws, by far the best in the NFL so far. Always small sample sizes here, but that's one of the stats I look at that you'll hear me cite on this show a lot, is those 10-plus yard throws, because I think that highlights defenses that are making life difficult on quarterbacks, usually avoiding explosive plays, and it usually pairs with their pass rush. And I think the Bills have one of the best combinations this year of getting after the quarterback and making life difficult down the field in coverage. The EPA allowed is like minus 0.8. I mean, you're almost losing a point, NFL teams, every time you throw 10-plus yards on the Bills this year. So tough to keep that up, but it shows just what they're doing with turnover in the secondary, with all those veterans that they've lost. So impressive job by the Bills defense so far.
Yeah, and I do wonder if Buffalo's defense can stop the run game that Baltimore has. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, obviously they absolutely annihilated Dallas on the ground. Dallas has the worst run defense in the NFL by a reasonable margin at this point. Buffalo's is better than that, but it's still they've been running this style of defense for years. You know, the 2 high coverage shells, force everything underneath. But they have always kind of invited the run a little bit. Like, they've tended to be a little bit soft on the ground, and now you're going up against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Can they tighten it, you know, for a specific game, a one-off game plan? Let's concentrate more on that than we normally do. Or is that going to be an area where Baltimore can have continued sustained success and theoretically keep the game in their favor?
Yeah, see, that's an interesting one for me. I mentioned the Bills. They're 5th in pass rush grade by PFF. They're middle of the pack from a run defense grade standpoint, and that's kind of how they've been overall. You know, during the Sean McDermott era, there are games where you can run all over them, not to the point where the Cowboys are.
Yeah.
But that type of idea. So I think the Ravens can do that. I'm also worried. I'm not worried about. Curious about the mental state of Lamar Jackson or the play style of Lamar Jackson. Does he treat this like the Week 1 game against Kansas City where he tries to take over? I mean, he was playing well within himself on Sunday. A lot of his runs were just, you know, I'm just going to keep it, and he did it 8 or 9 times, and it was always effective against Dallas. In the Kansas City game, it did feel like a lot of drop back, give it a read or two, and then, hey, I'm going to go make something happen. Does he treat this like an AFC playoff game like he did in Week 1 against the Chiefs? Sunday Night Football, trying to make a statement here. So this one should be fun.
Yeah.
Really quick, Josh Allen this year, the big knock on Allen through the years has been turnovers. Mm-hmm. He's got no turnovers. He's got 3 turnover-worthy plays, 0 interceptions. So what do we think here? Is this too much of a narrative that, oh, you know, it's a new Josh Allen? I mean, I think he's playing a lot more controlled. One of his turnover-worthy plays, they were up like 4 scores against Jacksonville the other night. It was a bad throw in the end zone, but it's like wouldn't have mattered. Is this a new Josh Allen that is playing within structure? The structure is good, by the way, with Joe Brady, what they've done. But when he needs to be Superman, they've got that as well.
So we've been talking a lot in the first few weeks about how one of the good things for Buffalo is that they haven't really needed him to be Superman yet. You know, they've been winning these games where he hasn't had to do a whole lot. He still made spectacular plays. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I'm just saying that in the spectrum of how much do you need Josh Allen to be insane in order to win the game, they haven't needed him to do that much, right? So that probably has something to do with the lack of turnover-worthy plays, that they haven't needed him to force it that much. The other thing is, when you look at his career, the turnover-worthy plays have tended to come in bunches, right? Like, he actually has quite a lot of games where he doesn't put the ball in harm's way at all.
Often against the Jets.
Yes.
When they come in bunches.
But like last season, he had 23 turnover-worthy plays last season, but he had 7 games with 0, right? So 7 games where he didn't put the ball in harm's way at all, but then he had a game with 4, 2 more games with 3, and then a bunch of multiple turnover-worthy play games. So right now, he's got a fairly low turnover-worthy play rate, though, interestingly, still larger than last year. But we haven't seen the meltdown game yet, right? We haven't seen him really go completely off the deep end, start forcing the ball left, right, and center. And I think that's probably connected with the fact that they haven't needed to. They haven't had to force into that. So I'm not buying yet that, like, hey, Josh Allen's changed. He's a completely different player. He's going to be more careful with the football. We're never going to see him do anything crazy again. I think we've just gone a few games where that hasn't happened yet. And doesn't mean it's going to happen in this game, but I think it's still out there, right? It's just like a giant shark out in the cold, dark night. It's still there, right? It's still circling the boat somewhere. It's not, the threat hasn't evaporated.
Josh Allen, the shark, circling.
Jaws. The music's still playing, you know?
Josh Allen's turnovers are Jaws, just lurking and ready to be unleashed at any given time. Yeah, I do feel like I say this every year, Sam. We like to tell stories off the first 3 or 4 games of the season. Like, here's this new thing that we saw when any 3 or 4 game stretch at any point during the season can have this new narrative attached to it. And I do remember defending Josh Allen last year, saying, look, he's got a stretch of play where he hasn't turned the ball over or had turnover-worthy plays. Like, acknowledge that it's been, in bunches. And it is interesting, though, how good the Bills look offensively, putting players in space. I think they have a chance to continue that against Baltimore on Sunday night. So Ravens favored by 2.5. Sunday Night Football. Where are you going with this one?
I'm going to go with the Bills. I'm kind of surprised that this line is where it is, and I think you have to buy into Buffalo. Have looked a much better team so far.
Yeah, I'm also going with the Bills, and Harry's going with the Bills. So I got them. My question with Buffalo is just you don't want to peak too early in the season. Every quarter of the season there's different ebbs and flows to the year, and you want to be peaking going into playoff time. But boy, the Bills look really good right now. So I'll ride that wave, as you and Harry also are.
Yeah.